I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I thought about Daniel. About the storage box. About the documents. About the question that refused to leave me alone. Why had Ethan hidden them? At 9 o'clock the next morning, Rebecca arrived. She looked exhausted. No makeup. Red eyes. Wrinkled clothes. The wedding had happened less than 48 hours ago. Yet she looked years older. She carried a small cardboard box against her chest. Neither of us spoke at first. She stepped into my apartment. Set the box on the kitchen table. Then backed away from it. As if it frightened her. Everything is inside. I stared at the box. My hands felt cold. Did you read it? Rebecca nodded slowly. Some of it. And? Tears immediately filled her eyes. I think Ethan has been lying to everyone. The words landed heavily. Not because they surprised me. Because I was beginning to fear the same thing. The box looked ordinary. The kind people use when moving old photographs. Old bills. Old memories. Nothing special. Yet something inside had terrified Ethan enough to hide it for 10 years. Slowly, I opened it. The first thing I saw was a photograph. Daniel, standing beside Ethan. Ethan couldn't have been older than 15. Both of them smiling. Both of them happy. For a moment, my chest ached. I remembered that day. A fishing trip. A summer afternoon. A simpler life. Before loss. Before secrets. Before lies. I placed the photograph aside. Underneath were folders. Receipts. Bank records. Business reports. And finally, a sealed envelope. My name was written across the front. Not typed. Written. In Daniel's handwriting. My breath caught. I hadn't seen that handwriting in 11 years. For a moment I couldn't move. Couldn't breathe. Couldn't think. Then I carefully opened the envelope. Inside was a letter. 5 pages. The date at the top made my stomach tighten. 3 weeks before the accident. Exactly as Rebecca had said. My hands shook as I began reading. My dearest Diana, if you're reading this, something has gone wrong. The words blurred immediately. I had to stop. Take a breath. Start again. I hope I'm being overly cautious. I hope this letter never leaves the drawer. But lately I've learned things I can't ignore. My heart pounded. I continued reading. Someone inside the company has been moving money. I frowned. That made no sense. Daniel's business had been small. Very small. Why would anyone steal from it? The next paragraph answered the question. At first I believed it was bookkeeping errors. Then I believed it was incompetence. Now I know better. A chill moved through me. I kept reading. The numbers are being changed intentionally. And I know who is doing it. My eyes widened. No, that couldn't be right. Because the next line contained a name. A name that made my entire body freeze. Ethan. For several seconds, I couldn't process what I was seeing. I read the line again. And again. And again. The name never changed. Ethan. Our son. Daniel believed Ethan had been altering records. Years before the wedding. Years before the hidden accounts. Years before the investigations. Years before everything. Rebecca covered her mouth. She had already read this part. She already knew. I forced myself to continue. I don't think he's doing it out of malice. I think he's doing it because he's convinced himself he'll fix it later. A tear slid down my cheek. That sounded exactly like Ethan. Exactly. Daniel knew it too. The letter continued. He's smart enough to justify anything. That's what scares me. People think greed looks like greed. It doesn't. It starts as entitlement. I closed my eyes. The words hurt because they felt true. Painfully true. The second page was worse. Much worse. Daniel explained how he had discovered missing funds. Not large amounts. Small amounts. Tiny amounts. Hundreds of dollars. Then thousands. Then more. Always followed by explanations. Always followed by promises. Always followed by excuses. And every time Ethan promised to stop. Every time, Daniel had believed him. Because he was his son. Because fathers want to believe. Because love sometimes blinds us. Then I reached the paragraph that changed everything. Yesterday Ethan admitted he took the money. My chest tightened. Rebecca gasped softly. I continued. He said he was investing it. He said he could multiply it and return everything. He said he was helping us. The room felt smaller. Suddenly I understood something. This wasn't new behavior. The investigation. The forged signatures. The hidden accounts. The inflated invoices. None of it had appeared out of nowhere. The seeds had been planted years earlier. Then I reached the final page. And my world shifted. Daniel wrote, I've arranged a meeting with Ethan next week. If he tells you otherwise, don't believe him. I'm giving him one last chance to tell the truth. I frowned. Next week? The accident happened 3 weeks later. So the meeting had happened. Hadn't it? Then I saw the next sentence. And my blood ran cold. If Ethan refuses, I'll report everything. The letter slipped from my fingers. Rebecca stared at me. Neither of us spoke, because suddenly we both understood. Daniel had planned to expose him. His own son. Not out of hatred. Out of love. The kind of love that refuses to help someone destroy themselves. I picked the letter up again. My hands trembling. There was one final paragraph. The last words Daniel ever wrote to me. No matter what happens, remember this. Protecting someone from consequences doesn't save them. It teaches them they can survive without character. And eventually that becomes the most dangerous lie of all. I stopped reading. Silence filled the apartment. Heavy, painful, endless. Then Rebecca whispered, "Oh my God." I nodded slowly, because for the first time, I finally understood. Ethan hadn't become dishonest after Daniel died. He had simply lost the only person willing to stop him. And now another terrible question was forming. A question neither of us wanted to ask. A question buried beneath 11 years of grief. If Daniel planned to expose Ethan, what happened at that meeting? And why had Ethan hidden this letter for more than a decade? The answer would arrive that very afternoon. Because investigators had just uncovered something from the week of Daniel's accident. Something nobody had noticed before. A deleted voicemail, recovered from an old backup. A voicemail left by Daniel, only hours before he died. And in that message, he sounded afraid. The call came at 2:17 in the afternoon. I remember the exact time because I was still sitting at my kitchen table with Daniel's letter spread in front of me. The pages looked harmless now. Just paper, just ink, yet they had shattered 11 years of assumptions. My phone vibrated. Charles Whitmore. Again. I answered immediately. Charles? His voice sounded different, tense, controlled, the way people sound when they are trying not to reveal how serious something is. They found it. A knot formed in my stomach. Found what? There was a pause. Then, the voicemail. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. The voicemail, the one investigators had mentioned. The one left by Daniel hours before he died. The one nobody knew existed. Can I hear it? Charles exhaled slowly. Yes. My heart started pounding. Rebecca sat across from me. The moment she saw my face, she knew. This is it, isn't it? I nodded. An hour later we were sitting inside a conference room at a law office. The atmosphere felt heavy, too heavy. Charles was there. 2 investigators were there. A digital recorder sat in the center of the table. Nobody touched it. Nobody wanted to. One investigator finally spoke. The message was recovered from a backup server belonging to a phone carrier. I nodded silently. The recording is authentic. My chest tightened. Then he pressed play. Static filled the room. A few seconds passed. Then, Daniel's voice. For the first time in 11 years. I heard my husband's voice. Every breath left my body. Rebecca immediately began crying. I couldn't move, couldn't blink, couldn't breathe. Daniel sounded tired, exhausted, but unmistakably himself. Hey, sweetheart. The words nearly broke me. He always called me sweetheart. Always. The room disappeared. For a moment it was just me and him again. Like no time had passed. Like he wasn't gone. Like none of this had happened. Then his tone changed. Serious. Urgent. Diana, if you're hearing this, I couldn't reach you. A chill ran through me. The message continued. I just met with Ethan. Every person in the room froze. I gripped the edge of the table. Daniel took a shaky breath. Then, we had a fight. Rebecca covered her mouth. One investigator lowered his eyes. Nobody interrupted. Nobody moved. Daniel continued. I told him everything has to stop. The room felt colder. He doesn't understand how serious this is. Another pause. Longer this time. Then came the sentence nobody expected. I think he's scared. Not angry. Not dangerous. Scared. Even now Daniel was trying to protect his son. Trying to understand him. Trying to see the good in him. My eyes filled with tears. Because that was exactly who Daniel was. The recording crackled. Then Daniel spoke again. More quietly now. As if thinking out loud. I told him I wouldn't cover for him anymore. The investigators exchanged glances. I felt my pulse quicken. Daniel continued. He begged me not to report it. My heart sank. The letter had been true. Every word. Then came another silence. And finally, he said if I exposed everything, I'd destroy his future. The room remained completely still. Daniel sighed heavily. The kind of sigh people make when their heart is breaking. I told him some futures need to be destroyed before they destroy you. Tears rolled down my face. Because that sounded exactly like something Daniel would say. Exactly. The voicemail continued. And then, everything changed. Daniel's voice lowered, almost to a whisper. There was something else. The room seemed to lean forward. Every person listening sensed it. The real reason for the message. The thing he had called to say. I discovered he wasn't acting alone. My breath caught. Rebecca looked confused. Charles frowned. The investigators stopped taking notes. Nobody expected this. Not acting alone? What did that mean? Daniel answered almost immediately. I know who helped him. The room went silent. Even the air seemed to stop moving. Then, the recording cut out briefly. Static. Distortion. A few lost seconds. When Daniel's voice returned, only part of the sentence remained. Can't prove it yet. Then another burst of static. Then, but if anything happens. The room froze. If anything happens, start with Victor. Victor, the former business partner. The same man who had testified against Ethan. The same man who claimed he had warned him. Everyone stared at each other. Nobody spoke, because suddenly the story no longer made sense. Why would Daniel point toward Victor? Victor had been helping investigators. Victor had exposed Ethan. Victor appeared to be one of the good guys. So why was Daniel suspicious of him? The voicemail ended 30 seconds later. No dramatic confession, no final revelation, just Daniel promising he would come home that night. And then, silence. Permanent silence. Nobody moved after the recording ended. The room sat frozen, trying to understand what we had heard. Finally one investigator spoke. Victor never mentioned this. Charles nodded slowly. No. Rebecca looked pale. What does it mean? Nobody answered. Because nobody knew. Not yet. Then another investigator opened a file. I think we do. Every eye turned toward him. He slid a photograph across the table. An old photograph. A surveillance image. Grainy. Blurry. Dated 11 years earlier. The week of Daniel's death. I stared at it. Then my blood ran cold. Victor was in the picture. Standing beside Ethan. Outside a bank. Carrying a briefcase. The date stamp matched the exact week Daniel had written the letter. What is this? Rebecca whispered. The investigator answered. A withdrawal. My stomach tightened. How much? The investigator looked down, then back up. $280,000. The room exploded with questions. Charles stood. Rebecca gasped. I couldn't speak, because suddenly Daniel's voicemail made horrifying sense. Victor hadn't tried to stop Ethan. At least not in the beginning. Years ago, he had been helping him. Helping him move money. Helping him hide it. Helping him build the very system now collapsing around them. And if that was true, then Victor's testimony wasn't courage. It was survival. A man abandoning a sinking ship before it dragged him under too. The investigators exchanged looks. One finally spoke. We think Victor turned on Ethan years ago. Rebecca stared. Why? The answer arrived before anyone could speak. The conference room door opened. Everyone turned. A woman entered carrying another file. She looked directly at the lead investigator. Then handed him a document. He read it. His eyes widened. Then he looked at all of us. Especially me. And said 7 words that changed everything again. Victor wasn't the mastermind either. The room fell silent. I could hear my own heartbeat. Rebecca looked terrified. Charles looked stunned. I barely managed to whisper. Then who was? The investigator slowly opened the file. Inside was a name. A name none of us expected. A name connected to Ethan. Connected to Daniel. Connected to everything. And when I saw it, I felt the floor disappear beneath me. Because the person who started all of this was family.